Industrial data is everywhere, scattered across data silos and different naming conventions. What if it all resided in one place? Canary's data historian acts as the foundation for industrial data, providing a solution that is reliable, scalable, and affordable. Canary helps teams collect and store industrial data from across their operation. In most industrial operations, that means managing thousands of data points. At that scale, how you collect and store your data is critical to long-term success, but storing data is only the first step. Canary adds the context needed to make sense of it by organizing data around asset models and applying calcs and events that turn raw signals into meaningful insight. As your operation grows, Canary grows with you, enabling analysis, visualization, and data sharing across your organization. Insights are available on any device and in the tools your teams already use. Today, Canary supports operations around the world, with over 30,000 installations across 70 countries, built on nearly 40 years of experience.
My name's Steve Mason. I'm the COO at Canary Labs. We're a family-owned business. We've been around for 40 years. We actually just celebrated our 40th year last year. We've had over 30,000 installations during that time of our software, and we're deployed over 70 countries in the world. Today, we're trying to address the problem of you have thousands of tags across multiple sites, or maybe you have hundreds of thousands of tags. And so where is that data going to live? Where is it going to be stored? And so that data needs a home, a place where it can be stored efficiently and then retrieved very easily. And so a house is only good as the foundation on which it's built. And so the Canary solution is built around its time series database, the Canary Historian. And so that database needs to be open, it needs to be scalable, it needs to be reliable. So we're super efficient at doing just that. But we don't just store your data. Once it's within the historian, then we can build asset models on top of that. So part of this solution is not just storing the data, but then maybe comparing site to site between the different sites that we're consuming into it. And then we also have a trending tool, a reporting tool called Axiom, which will read the data out of the historian. So we're going to look at that towards the end of the demonstration. So without further ado, I kind of want to do a live demo of those three steps. First, collecting and storing the data, how we do that. Then we're going to build an asset model on top where we can define assets, and if we need to, we can even restructure the tag naming convention that's coming in, and then we'll build an Axiom report using that model. So the first thing I'm going to display here is our admin client. So this is the tool that we use to configure the system. And so we're first going to start by going to our OPC collector. Now, we could have connected with MQTT. We have an MQTT collector, but for this demonstration, I just happen to use the OPC UA collector. And so we're going to connect to Factory B using it. And I've split it across three different collectors, three different sessions. And so I already have the first one that's already configured and running. And I'm going to demonstrate how to configure the next session. And then once we're all done with everything, I'm going to come back and we'll enable that last site and kind of see how it can dynamically discover that and bring it up into our reporting tool, Axiom. Okay? So first go down to configuration. So here's the one that's already configured and running. That's their site 1. And so here's site 2. So I won't go through in complete detail, but we've given it a name. We've given it a destination, so we're just logging it to a local historian in this demo. We can split and send that to multiple locations, so maybe you have a site historian, maybe you have a corporate level historian, so we can multiplex that data stream and send it to as many destinations as we want. Our store and forward service can also proxy data through layers of the network, so maybe you have a DMZ that you need to get data until your historians may be installed at level 4 and your collectors at level 3, and you have to get through a DMZ. So we can get through that DMZ using the store and forward service, which can act like a proxy. We're going to store it in a data set, which acts just kind of like a folder structure within the historian. So this is going to site 2. And then we've just provided down here, this is the host name of the OPC server, which we're going to connect to. And so the first thing I'm just going to do is go to my group, and I'm going to browse that OPC server. Oh, let me drag that screen over. It's on my other screen. Here we go. All right, so here's what we're presented with. Here is site 1 that we're already collecting from. So I'm going to pick this path. Our OPC collector has essentially 2 modes. You can do a tag-based session, which you can browse and pick individual tags, add them to your session, start logging them. Or we have a path-based session, which is kind of similar to like Spark-Plug-Me and MQTT. You subscribe to a topic and log everything underneath that topic. So that's kind of what this path-based solution is. So I'm going to pick site 2 and apply it, hit OK. So we're going to log everything that falls underneath that branch within the OPC server. If I wanted to, I could go and I could add filters to either maybe exclude certain tags that I don't want that fall under that branch, or maybe some inclusion rules to only pick certain tags within that branch. For this purpose, I'm just going to log everything that falls underneath site 2. So I'll hit apply, and I'll start that logging session. We've got a few others that are already running. So this is right now, it's going through this process of browsing through and finding the tags that it needs to log. So as far as architecture goes, this is where Canary's first introduced into the system with our collectors, right? We're connecting to some data source, whether it's a UA server, an MQTT broker. We have a module for Ignition if you want to log data from Ignition. So we have several collectors, so we start out at the collector level, and then every collector is paired with a store and forward service. And so here's all the current streams of data I have logging into my historian. And we can see there's site 1, here's site 2. We can see the number of tags that are coming through there. And in a typical architecture, right, the collector is typically remote from the historian and it's pushing it to. So you could have maybe hundreds of collectors that are all pushing to a central historian or to multiple historians. So once we get through the store and forward service, that will then actually hand it off to the historian. And here are those data sets that I was talking about. These are just like that folder structure. So essentially each session, each source is going to go to its own data set. And if we look at site 2, we just started logging data, and we create daily files to write to. And so at midnight, this will roll over, and we'll create another file to write to. And so if I drill into this, here's our tags. So if we click on some of these, depending on which ones are updating, let's see. All right, that's getting some more updates. So you can see the tag names. Very nice for us. It already has a UNS. It's very well-defined tag structure. So you can see the site, then there's an area, and then we have different pieces of equipment underneath each area. And we call these TVQs, these individual updates that come through. So it's a timestamp, value, and quality. So here, so the historian is that main component, it's that main hub that all of our other ancillary services are built around to either write data to it or to read data out from it. All right, so we've got data, it's logging, it's stored. At this point, I could start making dashboards and start trending, but we haven't really added any context to the data, okay? We haven't really defined what our assets are. And so that's the next step here. And so that acts, that goes through the views service. If you're familiar with like asset framework, and so the views is kind of equivalent to what Pi's asset framework was, only we're kind of doing it after the fact of logging data. Again, the naming convention here was very well defined. Obviously that is not always the case. Sometimes you're logging tags that are very cryptic. There's not a lot of context in them. And so we don't force you to go and do all your renaming at the source, at the level 2 or in a PLC, that could be extremely costly to do that. We'll take whatever naming convention that's already there, we'll store it, and then we can alter that and create a UNS within our view service if need be. And if there's not enough context within that tag name, we can also use metadata, attach metadata to those tags, and build a model solely off of property values attached to the tags. Okay? So this is my own system. It's kind of a dev system. So this is the local historian. This is what you get out of the box. If I were to drill into here, this would be the same thing as in the historian. This next level, these are all my data sets. Okay, and I could keep drilling into these. So this is what you have out of the box, this local historian. But then you have all of these other virtual views built on top of that. And so for instance, I have this ProveIt beverage. This is the one that we're looking at that I've already built this ahead of time, but essentially if I go in and edit this, okay, we have all of these rules to either alias or manipulate that tag name if we need to. So we would call those model roles, so I can actually, if I edit one of these, all right, essentially all we're trying to do, we have site1 as a data set name, but we also have site1 coming from the OPC server, so we're trying to eliminate that redundancy in the tag name. So this would be considered a model role to do that restructuring and to get it into the format that you want. Once all of the model roles have taken place, so in this example, we've gone through the first 7 roles are just doing that restructuring. And then the final 20 roles is where we actually define at which level what those assets are. And so we can say at the first branch, we're calling that first branch a site asset. And then underneath a site, we have areas and so on and so forth. And so I can go down to, we're going to look specifically at labeler lines and see, where's my labeler line at? Right here. So here's a labeler line. It's at level 3. Now we have other assets at that level, so you can have different assets at different levels throughout the hierarchy. And I can start expanding these. You can kind of see that structure built out. And so here are all the child assets of a site. If I drill into an area, and if I, where can I grab that? Pull that up there. You can start seeing the child assets that are nested underneath the parent assets. Okay. So I'm going to close this, and so here is our view that we're going to use to base our Axiom report off of. And again, if I drill into here, right now I've got 2 sites. Eventually we're going to get to that 3rd site. And so you can see here it's labeled a site, and here are all the child assets that fall underneath that. And I could drill into each one, drill into I've defined this as an area. And then if I go into an area, I've got a mixing room, tank storage, under tanks. I've got 6 tanks here until I actually get down to some metric tags within each asset. Okay. So the reason we do that, so Axiom, like we're going to get to, but if you're building calcs or events, I don't want to build one calculation that hits one asset. I want to do one calculation that can iterate across 9 tanks or 100 wells or whatever that asset may be. So we do have a calcs and events service. And so I have a few calcs that are built here, and we also do some events. So as a simple example, one I've created. So here I chose the tank asset. Right now I've got 9 of them, and I'm just doing a simple time average. I'm doing a daily average of this temperature tag, okay? So I've created one calc that's iterating across all 9 tanks. And then we also have events. Actually, let me start all of these. And so here's one about a labeler line work order. So there's a work order tag underneath a labeler line. And so I've created an event. It's basically anytime that work order tag changes, okay, that's going to capture a new event. Well, in that process, I want to know what the work order actually was, what item they were making, and the quantity. And so events are stored in a SQLite database. They're not stored in the historian, but they can also be configured to be stored in a Microsoft SQL database to capture those condition-based events. All right. So we have the data stored. We've added some context through views. We've created a virtual view on top of that data. And so the final thing I want to do is show, if I can pull it up here. Okay, so this is our reporting tool. There's a chart side to it in application, so the application is more like the dashboarding, like HMI capabilities. So you've got your screen, and we have all of our different controls that are just drag and drop. But so you get the full potential out of Canary is to create those virtual views, define those assets, and now we can use that information to build a dynamic dashboard instead of something that's just static. And so all of our container controls within Axiom have an asset property. So, and the container is one, or the screen is one of them. So if I scroll down here, you're going to see there's an asset instance property. And here are all the different virtual views that I have created in my system. We're looking specifically at the ProveIt beverage one. And here are all the assets that are available within that view. And so we're going to set the screen to the site asset. And we'll just pick one to begin with. So I'm going to start with a CapShack. That's what I called it, or I think that was one of the metadata for it. That one has some data already that's been logging for a while, so I'll start with this one. And right now it defaults to this modal option, which gives us this little asset icon that we can switch between those two sites, but the more popular version is the inline. And let's set the width of that to 200 instead. Okay. And now I can start dragging controls out here. So I'm going to start with a trend graph. Let's pull that across. Let's add some trends. All right, you can see it already has focus on that site that my screen is set to the CapShack site. And let's just throw some downtime tags. Let's see. Time idle. Let's throw 4 tags on there. Let's get rid of that. All right, so currently we're looking at 1 hour. Let's look at 10 days. All right, so there's 10 days worth of data. And so very quickly, if I go put it into live mode, and actually let me do full screen here. Now, this site, we just started logging data, so we're not going to see a whole lot here yet. If we look on the very edge, data has just started to come in here, but I can switch back and forth between the sites. I've only created one screen, but imagine if you had 20 sites, right? You're doing this one time and it's iterating across all of them. Let's go back to edit mode. So the screen is set to the site. Now I'm going to drop an asset template down here. Okay, so the asset template has to be set to an asset type. And you can see we've already bypassed the view screen because the screen is already set to that ProveIt beverage view. And now it's giving the option and it says, okay, here are all the child assets that are available for a site. And we're going to use labeler line as an example. All right, and immediately it finds, let's resize it here. It finds that there are 4 labeler lines within the CapShack site. And so whatever I do to one of these, it will iterate across all the other panels. So let me reference something right here. Okay, so let's first drop a donut gauge out here. Let's put it here. We're gonna add, there's an rate actual tag, yep. And let's put a label on there. and we'll call it actual rate. And let's center those. And we're going to keep dragging some other controls on here. So we got a linear gauge. And we have an availability tag. So immediately it gives me focus, on the tags that pertain to that particular asset. So these are tags that are specific to a labeler line now. And let's copy this. And this is availability, I think was what we called it. Oh, if I can type. All right, now I can notice this scale is going up to 100. I know this tag only goes from 0 to 1, so I need to change that. So I'm going to select my linear gauge and set its, where is it? Scale max. I'm going to set that to 1. And then the interval, let's go by 0.5. Okay, that looks a little bit better. And let's do another one of those. So I can do a Control-C, Control-V, so I'll just copy that. And I'm going to change its source tag. And I think the other one we'll do is performance. Okay. And all right, we'll say that's good for right now. So again, I'm going to put it back into live mode. And again, when I switch to Filler Central, it only has 2 labeler lines in it. So immediately it auto discovers the number of child assets it has and populates that data. We can even do some filtering on it. So maybe I actually want to sort the labeler lines maybe based upon that actual rate tag. So I can do a sort by and then put my tag in square brackets. So I think it's called rate actual. All right, so you can see these ones are at 0, so it's sorting these ones first, and this one's at the most. All right, I'm going to create one more screen. So let's say, we'll call this one an overview. And maybe we have one that's called labeler line details, right? We want more information on the labeler lines. The first thing I'll do, I'll pull out one of those, look at the events table. And let's choose, we had that labeler line work order. Okay. And then, so let's also set this screen to the labeler line asset type. So I'm going to choose my asset instance, ProveIt beverage. So instead of site, I'm actually going to choose the labeler line. Pick one to start. Hit apply. So now these are events that are specific to that labeler line. Let's stack them that way. Let's throw another trend graph on here. And we're going to do, let's see, refer to what I did over here. All right, we'll do rate actual and rate standard. So let's add these two tags. And let's link those together. Okay. And then let's do a limit actually on the chart itself. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to do a high limit. If this tag is greater than the standard, I want to change the color of that tag and maybe fill it in. So I'll go down here. Here's a low limit. I'll do a fixed or a variable limit based upon the other tag, and maybe I want to change its color. Oh, let's make it green. And then let's also fill in underneath if it exceeds that. Okay. Oh, I don't think it picked up that color. And then we'll do one more control. Let's do a scatter plot. And we will do this one, we'll do performance for the x-axis. And let's do time running. So let's call it that. Performance versus running. All right, it defaults to 15-minute intervals over the last hour. Let's do 1 hour intervals over the last day. All right, so we can do a scatter plot this way. All right. So what we have so far, we have this. Actually, I'm going to add one more thing on here. Let's put the screen is set to that labeler line. I'm actually going to, so we know which one that is, I'm going to set an asset label here so we know which asset we're on. And let's make that large. Okay, so screen 2 is set to the labeler line. This asset template is also set to that same data type. Asset labels have a navigation property so that if I click on it, I can go to another application I've created, I can open up a chart I've created, or I can go to another screen within this current application. So that's what I've chosen. I've chosen this screen option so that when I click this label, it's going to take me to the labeler line details screen and then display that data there. So let's go to live mode. And all right, right now I'm on the Cap Shack. I can go to Filler Central. If I go, let's go to Cap Shack instead because there's more data here. And maybe I'm interested, it's like, oh, something's going on with labeler line 4. So I click that. You can see we're now on labeler line 4. It has loaded that particular asset that I clicked from the asset, from the overview screen, and has loaded that information for that screen. So that's really, I guess, getting the most out of the Canary system is building those virtual views, defining those assets, and then utilizing that within Axiom. Because I can create something once and then iterate that across however many asset instances there are. And so you can get very efficient about building these dashboards. Okay. All right, the last thing that I want to do is, there is supposed to be 3 sites for factory view. So I'm going to go back to my admin, and let's go back to the OPC collector. So let's say, another month goes down the road, we've added a new site, we're collecting data from it now. So I'm going to, this is already configured, so I'm just going to start logging here. And eventually we should start getting data for site 3. Let's confirm that. Let's see if we're getting data in. Eventually we should see a data set appear in the historian. Maybe. Right now, looks like we're not getting any updates from Site 1 or Site 2. Well, this is what happens in a live demo, I guess. So eventually what we're expecting is once that data starts and starts collecting, we're going to get a new data set. Within the model, if I go back here into this virtual view that we've created, you can see the sources. So this is what's feeding that view. Typically, a virtual view is built upon data sets that you're feeding into it. I've kind of wild-carded this one. It's essentially saying any data set that starts with the keyword site, automatically consume that and build the model based upon those data sets. So since I labeled that site 3, once that data starts coming in, it's going to find that, rebuild the view, and then automatically, when I go back to Axiom, I should be able to refresh and see that next site. So we're still waiting for that data to actually connect, and we're still waiting on it. So I'm not sure, neither one of these is connecting or is currently logging data. As we wait for that to happen, I'll go back to my calculation. That's also why I've labeled the output tag. So this is where you would label the output tag of your calculation. So I'm sending this to site calcs. So that's another data set I actually want to consume into my model. So any calculation that I create on top of the raw data is also going to get written back to the site calcs data set, and we'll consume that into the ProveIt beverage view. We're still waiting for that to refresh. So while that's doing that, we answer. So the problem that we're trying to solve, again, I kind of stated at the beginning, is right. You have all of this data. Everybody wants to use data, whether it's for AI or some type of data analysis. That data has to reside somewhere, and so Canary can be that place where that data resides. We have an API that's open. We have a native gRPC API, and then on top of that, we have a web-based API for third parties wanting to come in and consume that data. Aside from our own native tools such as Axiom, we have an Excel add-in. And if you want to bring it into something like Microsoft SQL, we have an ODBC connection to do that. And let me check one more time before I keep moving on. So not yet, still waiting. How much does it cost? Well, in this particular instance, it was less than 3,500 tags. And so we're very upfront with our pricing. And so if you actually go to our website, canarylabs.com, you can select our pricing, go to our pricing page. And that's actually our entry level. That's our smallest system, is if you have less than 3,500 tags, it's less than 10K to purchase this solution. And then on top of that, we do an 18% customer care that's annual. It took me about, as far as logging the data, is almost just a few minutes to configure that. Probably a lot of the work that occurs is not really within the logging, the setting up the logging configuration. It's probably within the views in understanding how do you want to structure that data, especially if you don't have a UNS coming into it. So that's where probably most of the time, the most time-consuming thing is building these rules to structure that data and to define what those assets are, especially if those tag names, there is no rhyme or reason for them, or you're acquiring data from different assets you've acquired, and each one has its own naming convention. So, the messier the tag is coming in, the more robust these rules are to parse it and to create that UNS. So we're still waiting to see if we ever got that data from Site 3. Let's go back and check again. Hey, there's Site 3. I was getting to worry about that. Okay, so once this comes in, eventually it would trigger views, and this could take at most maybe 5 minutes, depending on the last time it rebuilt. The views service has like a cooldown, so once it rebuilds, it won't rebuild for another 5 minutes, and then it will rebuild to see, hey, do you have any new data sets, any new tags? So let's go and check our model here within views. And there we go. It has found, so we named this one the bottleneck factory. And if I go back to Axiom, let's go back to overview. And without really having to do anything in Axiom, anything in views, it has automatically found all of that. The only thing is I thought ahead and I said, okay, I'm going to name all of my data sets with that keyword site. And so when I build my model, I'm going to do a wildcard site asterisk. And so anything that comes in with that, it's going to automatically feed into here. So now I can switch between the bottleneck factory, which only has one labeler line, as opposed to something like the Cap Shack, which has 4. So that is the power behind Canary. We pride ourselves on our historian and how efficient it is, reliable and scalable it is, and how open it is to pull data out if you want into third parties. And then, again, we don't just stop with storing of data. You can build those asset models and utilize that functionality within things like Axiom or our Calcs and Event service. So thank you for tuning in.